You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Powered by FanthaTracks.com. It's the Fantha from Down Under.
G'day mate, how you going? This is Adam O'Brien, the Fantha from Down Under, here tonight to spread some Star Wars love and of course some Star Wars news and a look back at Brian Daley's second book in the Han Solo trilogy. The one that really started off, I think, the expanded universe and now known as Legends by the official HQ, but it is still an amazing series of novels which I think need to get some love from the newer generation of fans. It's amazing. And the coolest character out there, folks, is still Han Solo. Yeah, you like your Luke Skywalkers. Yeah, you like your Reys, your Finns and your Poes. And, of course, your Kylo Rens. But Han Solo is still the coolest of the characters in the Star Wars universe. Even counting the Mandalorian, folks, that's right.
And now it's time for the news, live from Quinlan's Cantina on the Gold Coast of Australia, with the Fantha from Down Under.
Alright folks, we've got one bit of news here this week which we're going to get right into, and it's quite troubling news, to be honest. It is the news that Alan Dean Foster is now no longer getting royalties for the work he done on Star Wars or the Fox properties that he was part of when he was attached to doing Aliens and Alien 3. Of course, he also wrote many of the novels you all know well and true growing up in the 80s and obviously late 70s as well. Obviously, one of the first you all would have gotten involved in reading of Alan's work was, of course, the novelization of Star Wars itself. I've still got mine, yellow paperback, and of course, it was the one that had the great little photos on the inside of it as well. That was the story that we all grew up with, the original Star Wars. Also, if you know Star Wars lore well, from the expanded universe, he also did Splitter of the Mind's Eye, which at the time was tentatively going to be a sequel if Star Wars hadn't succeeded on screen. But of course it was, and the sequel itself, this small, in some ways, TV-like project, whatever it was, comes down to it, was what was put together by Alan, and obviously eventually turned into the novel Splitter of the Mind's Eye. I first read it in the comic version, which was put out by Dark Horse Comics many years ago. I love it. And I've always loved Alan's writing. Obviously, he also worked on a prequel novel set between Episode 1 and Episode 2 about Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi's adventures pre-Attack of the Clones. That was called The Approaching Storm. But I knew him more for his work outside of Star Wars, Star Trek, and particularly Alien novels. I was a huge fan. I remember years ago growing up watching, it was TV on a Wednesday night. I was probably about 12 or 13 or something like that. Come home from school and had dinner, and I knew Enter the Dragon was going to be on TV that night on the 9 network. So I was like, wow, this is going to be awesome. Never seen the movie before, but seeing cutscenes. So I was really in a sort of a martial arts mindset at the time, movie-wise. But of course, as we do, we channel surf between shows that we watch and stuff like that, because the boredom of watching advertisements is nothing worse, folks. But as I watched these, I caught in between it on the 7 network, the film Aliens, and sort of got my interest into sci-fi again in the dark times. Obviously, after Return of the Jedi had left us, the merchandise winded down, and of course Star Wars went into its hermit stage for a little while. But Alien really brought me back in a big way. Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3 in particular, which is now my favourite, believe it. But the novelizations were always good. There was something about taking the films, imagining the world even further, which Alan does, because he's got such a wonderful vocabulary, and obviously his prose, is filled with not only the mind of somebody that knows technical jargon, like obviously for science fiction and stuff like that, and obviously knows the world of Star Wars, but he's just a great world builder. So we've got Alan to thank for a lot of great stuff when it comes to Star Wars, and of course all those novels as well. So I was a little disheartened to see that obviously he's put out through the SFWA. The big thing that disheartening is that he is not getting paid the royalties that he had for those books. Now, they're still in sale out bookstores everywhere. You can get them online and stuff like that. So shouldn't the writer get paid? People have been quite vocal about it, obviously. And it's feels like they've just missed something that they should have paid. Obviously, if you buy a company, at the end of the day, shouldn't you also be buying the creations that they have put together, obviously? So it's a little odd, and I do hope that Disney down the line pay Alan what he's worth, obviously, for his efforts. If you're an artist, you'd want that too, and I think that's something that needs to be said. It's weird, it's strange, and at the end of the day, I just hope these matters clear up for somebody that I think's brought a lot of joy to Star Wars fans out there too. There's a couple out there that don't agree. Some very good mates of mine actually just couldn't care less. Obviously, because this is now expanded universe turned into Legends, so to them it doesn't matter so much. But you know what? I'm going to tell you something. It did matter then, still matters now, and artists should be paid. Simple as that.
Fantatrax. Hoodoo!
Hey guys, welcome to the Phantom from Down Under, and I've got a little surprise for you, because I know you're all out there like the Sonics of Star Wars, and we have somebody who is an absolute master on that subject, the one, the only, the amazing James Semple. Buddy, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thanks, Adam, and somewhat surprised to be here.
Well, I always surprise our listeners, because I know there's so many musos out there, particularly Star Wars fans, that get really introduced to music, because as GL said himself, it's 80% of the experience of Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm, hands up, I'm one of those guys. Absolutely. I think a lot of people of my generation and subsequent, who come into Star Wars and just being so taken aback by that music, and then they've used that as a starting point when people say, well, this was the temp track or this was an inspiration, and people will go back and use that as a starting point to get a kind of wider knowledge of classical music. And obviously Williams himself has a vast knowledge of pretty much the entire repertoire of classical music and draws upon it really well. And I mean, it's such an influential score. It's the best-selling orchestral music of all time. It's impossible to laud too many superlatives upon it. I guess, as you say, it was the one thing that Lucas also said came out well. Everything was a compromise. The performances, the script, the special effects at the time. But the only thing that by far exceeded his expectations was Williams' score.
Oh, it really was. And I think the thing is that he's always really had a voice for the films themselves, but the characters too. I mean, a lot of those things we know so well through the characters that he portrayed that music through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard he gets quite, he's quite protective as a composer of the use of those things in a kind of nice way, in an artistic way, not in a kind of commercial way. But he's sort of, he spent a long time, for instance, coming up with Rey's theme, and he was very, very taken with it when he did. And, he really cares about that. For instance, I think it's reasonably well known that Williams suggested not using the Star Wars, the main kind of theme, because he associated that with Luke. So when it came to the prequels, he was like, we shouldn't really use that theme. So kind of interesting how stuff like that happens.
Oh, 100%. And I think even taking a step back, say another 20 years back when Phantom Menace came out, and we got an even different voice too, because he knew that was leading towards Luke. And we had things like, of course, Duel of the Fates, this chorus of amazing, voices behind one of the most operatic sounds in science fiction.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think history has been quite kind to the prequels. Actually, I think you have to. Star Wars fandom gets a bad name, and it's a bit unfair, really. But I think the expectation of such a life-changing film as Star Wars to have a prequel, it was pretty hard not to disappoint people. There was always going to be some aspect to it. But I think, like I say, I think history has been pretty kind to it. There was a lot of creativity and world building, and George didn't repeat himself, which was, so there's a lot of good to that. But yeah, absolutely. I think we saw how much in the intervening time Williams had grown as a composer. And also, again, going back to his reverence for the films, his music is very reverential. It's almost like sacred music. He's really he's taken it from the kind of adventure score, sort of Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon kind of thing that he did in the first ones, up to this, as I say, operatic level. And Duel of the Fates is really the kind of acme of that, this huge sort of towering piece of music against arguably one of the best lightsaber duels in the whole saga. So, yeah, it's quite interesting how he got to that point. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I feel a little bit like they had to kind of put weights on him a little bit for scoring the new trilogy. There was a lot of, we have to go back to the 70s, and one of the things was they asked him to score in a more traditional style and away from the way he got in the prequels, which I think was a bit disappointing in a way.
Yeah, and myself too. I mean, as an artist, you want to grow and expand your repertoire, and obviously your toolkit. And I think the big part of toolkit is, as yourself. I mean, for those that don't know out there, folks, James himself is a composer, great musician, and one hell of a guitarist, folks. Let's put that out there. But he also is somebody that has a love for all forms of music out there too. And I think that's one of the great things as a composer, that you can pretty much tap any genre because you have a love for it.
So all I was going to say is I think that, absolutely, that Williams has this repertoire. All of the composers do appreciate being able to write in these different genres. So he has this at his fingertips, and ideally, I would even argue as a composer, there's a lot of these composers coming up who are amazing. Gordie Howe, people like that, who's doing a lot of the video games, for instance. And John Powell's work on solo, where you can sort of tap into Williams. He is a genre unto himself, or at least his Star Wars music. Like, if you heard a piece of music now, even if it didn't use any of the main themes, just from the instrumentation and the harmony and the way it plays, you could probably hear if a piece of, like, say, action music was from Star Wars or, say, Superman. Mm-hmm. He has a different voice with both of those two pieces of music, even though you could argue they're very similar, big symphonic orchestra. Star Wars is more rooted in European tradition. Yeah. Superman very much goes on Copeland and American sounds. So, yeah, it's so that Star Wars sound is there, and Star Wars is different from Star Trek in that sense. For instance, you can hear the two really, really quickly. Like, even like I would say, like a fairly average listener, as long as they liked Star Wars and liked Star Trek and knew the sound, they would hear the difference straight away. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a different voice in both of those, but I still think the voice of Williams has obviously been an influence on not only his contemporaries, but also some younger composers back in the day too. Some of those went on to do Aliens, also Avatar, Titanic, and also one of our favourites, Willow.
I have absolutely no idea who you're talking about. So I actually had the genuine pleasure to meet James Horner, which was amazing. And actually, in many respects, one of my absolute favourite composers. Probably my favourite after Williams, but only very specific parts of his repertoire. So Willow, as you rightly say, his early stuff, basically, I absolutely love. I think he changed as a composer in later years. He was obviously incredibly successful when he changed, scoring the two biggest films of all time. But my love is that sort of almost boyish charm of his early works. So Star Trek Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock, Krull.
Krull, yes.
Absolutely one of my favourite movies. Now, it's not particularly well known outside of the UK, but my favorite movie scores as a film, it's obviously kind of dated a bit, but as a score, it's beautiful. And it's the LSO and Aliens again, classic stuff where he's taking the lead from a line from a Khatchurian piece. That's one of the alien kind of melancholy themes comes from that. So absolutely, and obviously Goldsmith was a big influence on him as well because he dated Goldsmith's daughter. Got invited to loads of Goldsmith's scoring sessions.
Nice. And folks, actually, if you haven't been over to a show we do on FPN, that's the Phantom Podcast Network, the work of James Semple can be seen there too, with the scoring, of course, of Making Tracks, the actual show itself. He does all the music on there, and he does a fantastic job. We also had him guest now, and again, as a co-host there, to chat about the work of Jerry Goldsmith as well.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Want to get your favourite track of Star Wars? What is your favourite?
Oh my God, that's a great question. Wow. I think it's the Force theme, actually. Mm-hmm. I know everyone, rightly loves the Imperial March, and but actually, my favorite score is A New Hope. Still, after all this time, it's still my favorite. I know a lot of people prefer Empire, but it's definitely A New Hope, and it is. I think it's probably the Binary Sunset. Yeah, the Force theme is phenomenal in my opinion. I absolutely love it, and I can talk about that forever. But I mean. There are numerous amazing tracks across all of that. But yeah, that's probably my favorite still to this day. The Force theme, I think, is one of his best creations ever.
It surely is. Yeah. It's amazing. So make sure you jump over there to Making Tracks, a Star Trek fan podcast on FPN. Check out the episodes we've done over there. Myself, Mark, James, and of course Rob Wainfer of the Bearded Trio there. Always having fun chatting about everything from the music, the episodes, to the technology, and the fun and characters of Star Trek. Pal, where can we find you on the web?
Wow. Okay. I'm on Twitter. If you look at my name, and I'm on Instagram, but I'm also on SoundCloud. So if you look for James A. Sample on SoundCloud, you get to hear a stack of my stuff.
Nice. And we'll leave links in the show notes, folks, to go and check that out. But a big thanks to James for jumping on today and having a quick chat about the work of John Williams.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Best, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
For the last episode of the show, obviously we didn't cover the second novel in the Han Solo trilogy by, of course, the late Brian Daley. But we're going to do that tonight, and of course it is Han Solo's Revenge. Now, doesn't that sound like some kind of 70s revenge crime drama or something like that? Well, it does kind of, yeah. But here in the pub tonight, we're sitting down, because I'm not 100% well right now. Unfortunately, I've been sick. So I've been laying off the ales and heading into the coffee, tea, and the glasses of H2O, folks. That's what we're drinking tonight here in the pub as we look at the life of Brian Charles Daley. Born in December 22, 1947. He's known obviously as a science fiction novelist, primarily running through obviously the 1980s, but he also worked in the 70s as well, and known for working on the NPR radio dramas, which a lot of us that grew up in that era, that was one of the many great parts of the Star Wars saga that kept us going between the films. Gave us a slightly different run, and again, just an amazing run too. And he was born in Englewood, New Jersey in the US, and obviously he's known for quite a bit of work. Not only the Han Solo Adventure series, but the Adventures of Hobart Floyd and Alacrity Fitzhugh series. The Robotech series we did under the name of Jack McKinney with his good friend of 2 decades, the one, the only, James Luceno. And they are an amazing continuation of the Robotech anime that came out in the mid-80s. He's an amazing author. I've seen some of his more original work as well, outside of these adaptations and continuations of series. And again, it's that great pulp science fiction style, which I've always enjoyed. Out of those two, of course, too, we find a lot of those in the local bookstores here in Australia in paperback, which you can find too. Like the Gamalor series you can find there too. A lot of the work that he did around those two has that sort of military edge to it, but also just straight down to the actual style of getting the world building in science fiction right. He just had that lingo. He had that feel for what was futuristic, what was something that sounded real. There was a certain earth to everything around and what he did too. It's amazing. So he was born in Englewood, New Jersey, and to Charles and Mira Daley. He's got himself a brother, David, and also a younger sister. He went to Northern Valley Regional High School at Old Tapan, and he also served in the armed forces, in the army, with a year's tour of duty in Vietnam. And again, as somebody who has a lot of military in his own family, that's me, and a Vietnam veteran father, all I can say is thank you for your service, Brian. Anyone that served to give us the freedoms that we have today, to fought the fights that you can't even imagine how bad would be. But all I can say is anyone that served, thank you for your service. After the army, he went to college at New Jersey City, and this is where he started to pump out the novels that we know him for. His first novel was The Doomfarers of Coromand. Again, a lot of these novels that you're going to see before he took off with Star Wars too, you'll find that he's got already that sort of adventure, sci-fi sort of edge to it. And the thing is, a lot of his rollick adventures would have the same feel when he would do in the 80s, the Robotech series. After the anime itself had ended, and they were going to do a series based on The Sentinels, which was a sequel series to Robotech, which the creator at the time, Carl Macek, had planned, got everything ready, and then after 3 episodes it all folded. And there really hasn't been a proper series since. There's been a couple of straight-to-video things that came out, couple of patch-ups of old episodes, but this was going to be original animation. But their continuation together as Jack McKinney himself, and of course the amazing James Luceno, also a Star Wars author as well, do an amazing job in continuing the series with, of course, Rick Hunter, Lisa Hayes, all those characters that you know well. And again, it has a real feel for Star Wars, as well as others where it has that space opera, soap opera edge to it, because you really get to know these characters and love them. Plus, Carl worked on Star Wars. A lot of people don't know that too. Obviously, he did the Star Wars spin-off novels, Han Solo at Star's End, and then, of course, Han Solo's Revenge, and vice versa. And then did the NPRs. So when you think about it, back in the day, it was himself and Alan Dean Foster and only a few others who had sort of extended this universe of Star Wars, maybe the Marvel comics as well. That was their extended universe until about 83. So he'd known James Luceno for over 20 years, and they did a lot of Robotech novels, over 20. Now, the ones that I like the most, if you're going to get into those, is the Sentinel series, mainly because that story had not been told. So, but you can get now through the owners of Robotech, which is Harmony Gold. They're now putting out those novels in omnibus editions. So if you want, you can get. I think it's about 5 or 6 of those together. So it's about 3 novels or 4 novels in each one. But you can also get them in ebook form as well, and they're just really good fun. And Luceno himself is also responsible for doing the 1,600-page manuscript for Gamma obviously the quartet that he put together too. But also, both of them, as Jack McKinney had worked together obviously on those, then went to work on The Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers. Now, if you don't remember that cartoon, this is a cartoon that came out, I think it was late 80s, if I remember right. And it was quite a good little Western sort of show. And I mean, we had shows like Brave Star and hot on the heels of shows like He-Man. But what was great about it is The Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers took 4 different lore officers and put them in this cartoon sci-fi setting. But it was quite well done, and the animation was well done, and plus had a very catchy song. But again, these guys were putting those together, so it's just amazing. Gamma Lore, though, was published after the passing of Daly, who died in 1996 at the age of 48, unfortunately, from cancer. So, again, a life taken too short. He'd also completed the production of The Return of the Jedi, NPR, just before he passed. So it's lovely that we got that trilogy from this amazing writer. We've got to let you know a little bit about how you can find this show and all the other amazing Fantha Track shows out there.
And this here's how you can find the Fantha from Down Under on the World Wide Web. You can catch Adam O'Brien, the Fantha from Down Under, at The Lethal Mullet on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also catch him on the Lethal Mullet podcast on Phantom Podcast Network. You can also catch him on Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast on Phantom Podcast Network. You can also catch him at The Mullet Guild on the Phantom Podcast Network at fpnet.podbean.com. Be sure to check out all the listings there and subscribe for the great shows also at panthatracks.com. All your Star Wars news in a single file.
We're so preoccupied with, the characters, in terms of what we want them to be, instead of just getting that adventure going. A lot of that has been missing from current, not just in Star Wars, but other areas too. You have to have a good, convincing story to really push characters through. Because again, we're going through the eyes of them into this world. We're going to see these things. It's like Apocalypse Now. When you're watching Martin Sheen, we're looking at the world of Vietnam through his eyes. We're doing the same with characters in the Star Wars universe. So we need to be able to see challenges that we wouldn't be able to face ourselves, because these characters are heroic. Challenges that are going to push them, to change them and better them as people. So, but of course, he did a lot of this in these great series too. On a whole, I think one of the great things that bringing the work through was, of course, The NPR added a kind of a cinematic edge to what he would put together. And really, if you haven't experienced it in a car, the great thing is if you're going for an hour's trip somewhere, or maybe from city to city, jump that NPR series on, because I tell you what, it really takes you away from where you are and puts you into the Star Wars universe with all these extended scenes and some familiar voices and some not so familiar, making the characters that we love today.
Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Star Wars fan, Fantha Tracks fan.
Han Solo's Revenge came out in 1979, originally published in the time, of course, of the Star Wars craze, at its peak with George Lucas, about to bring out the amazing Empire Strikes Back. These were the stories to keep you going in the meantime. It's the second in the trilogy, where we see Han and Chewbacca down in the luck after they've been going through a smuggling run that went bad. So, they take on a job offer from just some strange character and go to the planet Lure for the pickup, where they find that the things they're picking up are actually people. They are slaves. That's right, they're shipping slaves. Of course, you can think about it, Han and Chewbacca are the last people on the Falcon that would be allowing this sort of thing to carry on. And they have zero tolerance for that sort of thing. So, they have to obviously deal with slavers attempting to take over the Falcon in amongst all of this. And of course, they're also in need of cash credit. They're going from job to job like any tradesman would do. I mean, they got Han and, of course, Chewbacca going in the early days of smuggling runs. This is, the time when obviously they're going from payment to payment just to keep the Falcon going. Han and Chewbacca go to the planet Bonadan, where they find the slavers' leader, and of course trying to get payment from him. They need to get cash, cold hard cash. But they don't find them and don't make any contact with them. Instead, they find Fiola, who is the Assistant Auditor General with the CSA, the Corporate Sector Authority. Of course, we knew these organizations from, of course, the first novel, Han Solo at Star's End. Fiola then tries to get Han, to help him go against, of course, the slavers. He realizes the only way he's going to do it is by helping he will finally get paid, and to help her track down the slaving ring. From here, we see that Fiola keeping basically the slavers themselves watching Fiola, and also keeping really, really hard eye on Han and Chewbacca. And they try, no matter what they do, to keep apart Han and Chewbacca. And of course, they force them to that point through the story. So, Chewbacca, you'll find, flies, in this part, the Falcon. And Han then follows Fiola onto a Starliner. So the idea is that these two groups separately will come together on the planet of Amud. Amud? I hope I'm saying that properly, folks. Ahmad. There you go. And of course, trying to find out what's happening with the slavers. And of course, why the CSA is involved, or whether they're not involved, they're not sure. And of course, as they come down it, Han and Fiola come to the planet and uncover the evidence needed to, of course, take out a figure of really high authority in the slaving ring. And what they do is they then outwit them to a point where, of course, Fiola's superiors are able to take him out and take him. At the end of this, not only clearing the slate free for these slavers to get the punishment they deserve, they're able to finally get payment, patch up the Falcon, and get on their way. Yeah, this is a great story because not only obviously is it against slavery, which is obviously a great thing to stomp on, and characters like Han, who's, now that we've seen, even in the canon universe of Star Wars, those sorts of things, he's been able to show his heroic side. He's not just this reluctant hero. He's actually stands for something. He won't take it because he's been down that route on Corellia. And it's great. At the end of the day, he knows he still needs to get paid as well. We get some great different locations in this. Obviously, Ahmad, Bonadan as well, and of course, Lure. So like the Star Wars movies of the time, we get a few different locations. And of course, that's one of the things of Star Wars is constantly seeing different locales, like a Bond movie would or something like that. And Brian Daley really brings that together in this as well. We've got some shady characters that fit right in with Han Solo's area, obviously, to the fact that Han and Chewbacca are sort of got to go head-to-head with, again, more corporate security authority in there. You know, shades of the Empire in some ways, but still the police in this sector. So was a short, snappy story, but the best part of it, I think, again, is the stomping of things that we're seeing later. In, obviously, even in A.C. Crispin's ones, in both Paradise Snare and Rebel Dawn, we have echoes of this sort of adventure too. But I still think this is a grittier, more just straight out Han Solo smuggling venture. This one gets a solid 3.5 out of 5.
Well, that's all we have time for here tonight on the Fantha from Down Under. And we'll catch you next time, same place, same channel, and of course, with more Star Wars news in a single file from FanthaTracks.com's Australian edition. That's right, we'll catch you next time. So, until then, may the Force be with you, and enjoy your Star Wars fandom. We'll see you next time.
Warning, no Tauntauns were harmed in the filming and recording of this podcast.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.
Now here's a little blues song I put together just to celebrate the work and also recognise the work of Alan Dean Foster. Oh, there Disney, you gotta pay Star Wars authors what they're worth. There's a bloke called Alan Dean Foster, second man to write in this Star Wars. Gotta pay, yeah, you gotta pay. You gotta pay what they're worth for continuing the wars. That is Star Wars. That is Star Wars with Alan Dean Foster. Splitting the eye, splitting the mind's eye. With an approaching storm, he is a novelizer. You gotta pay. Oh, you gotta pay. You gotta pay for Star Wars authors. They create, oh, they create Star Wars, the great Star Wars. Yeah, come on, Disney, gotta do the right thing. You gotta pay Alan Dean Foster for Star Wars.